eyes widened in shock as she realized what had happened. Darasimi had run away. She had eloped with her boyfriend Toby. The note said that she couldn't go through with the wedding and that she was living with the man she truly loved. In the western part of Nigeria, there lived a beautiful and elegant young lady named Oreoluwa Akinola. Her friends called her Ore. She was tall, with a lovely smile, and had dark skin that made her look even more beautiful. Ore worked in a big office, and everyone liked her because she was kind and always did her work well. One Friday evening, after a long day at work, Ore looked at the time. It was already 6 p.m. The office had closed an hour ago, and all her colleagues had gone home to rest or have fun because it was the weekend. But Ore was not looking forward to the weekend. Her mind was heavy with thoughts. Ore's younger sister, Darasimi, was getting married in few days. The wedding was between Darasimi and a man named Adetola. Adetola was rich, well known, and considered the best bachelor in their town. But Ore knew that her sister did not love Adetola, and Adetola did not love her sister. The marriage was planned by both families, mainly for business reasons. Ore's family, the Akinolas, and Adetola's family, the Ayegbajejes, wanted to join their companies together. They thought that making Darasimi and Adetola get married was the best way to seal their business deal. In truth, the marriage should have been between Oreoluwa and Adetola because she was the elder sister, but Adetola did not want to marry her. Ore was bigger in size, and she had faced rejection from other men before because of her weight. Adetola said he would only agree to marry Darasimi, not Ore. Ore remembered how when they were in high school, she had a crush on Adetola. He was older than her, and she admired him a lot. But Adetola never paid any attention to her back then. And now, he was about to marry her younger sister. This made Ore feel very sad, and she didn't want to go home to see all the wedding preparations. She felt hot deep down inside. Instead of going home, Ore decided to visit her best friend, Temidayo. She called Temi on the phone and asked if she could come over. Temi said she was home and told Ore to come. Ore felt a bit better, knowing she could spend time with her friend. She packed her bag, left the office, and stopped by a restaurant to pick up food for her and Temi to eat. When Ore arrived at Temi's house, Temi was still talking on the phone. Ore quietly went to the kitchen and set the table, putting the food she had bought in plates. By the time Temi finished her call, she walked into the kitchen and saw the food nicely arranged on the table. "You always like to stress yourself," Temi laughed. "Why didn't we just eat from the takeaway packs?" Ore smiled and said, "I've never eaten from a takeaway pack, and I'm not going to start now. Come and sit down, the food is ready." They both sat down to eat. As they ate, Temi asked Ore about the upcoming wedding. "So, is everything ready for the wedding?" Temi asked. "Yes," Ore replied, "but I can't wait for it to be over so that I can have my peace." Temi looked at Ore with concern. "It's sad, Ore. Your sister is marrying the man you once liked, and you're just so calm about it." Ore shook her head and whispered, "Temi, you are the only one who knows that I had a crush on him. Please, let's not talk about it." Temi sighed. "I don't understand why. Why Dara didn't fight for her own love? Didn't she have a boyfriend?" "Yes," Ore said, "but my father insisted that she must marry Adetola. And you know my dad. Once he makes up his mind, there is no going back." Temi shook her head. "I still think she should have said no. It's not right to force someone to marry someone they don't love." Ore smiled sadly. "My parents believe that love comes later. My dad always tells the story of how he met my mom on their wedding day. He says love and respect come with time." After dinner, Ore stayed with Temi, talking about different things. They watched some TV and laughed together, which made Ore feel a little better. She stayed at Temi's place until it was late. When it was time to go home, Ore felt a bit heavy-hearted again, but she knew she had to face her family sooner or later. So she gathered her things and went home. When Ore got home, it was quiet. She quietly tiptoed to her room and lay down on the bed, tired from the long day. She fell asleep as soon as her head touched the pillow. The next morning, Ore was suddenly woken up by a loud noise. She looked at her clock and saw that it was already 8 a.m. She wondered who could be making such a noise early on a Saturday. Then, she heard the mother's voice. It was loud and filled with anger. Ore got out of bed and followed the sound to her sister Darasimi's room. When she got there, she saw her mother pacing up and down, holding a piece of paper in her hand. "What is going on, Mom?" Ore asked, looking around for Darasimi, but her sister's bed was empty. Without saying a word, her mother handed her the paper. Ore took it and began to read. Her eyes widened in shock as she realized what had happened. Darasimi had run away. She had eloped with her boyfriend, Toby. The note said that she couldn't go through with the wedding and that she was living with the man she truly loved. Ore couldn't believe it. Darasimi, her calm, obedient sister, had run away. The wedding was just a week away, and now this. Her mother looked at her with anger in her eyes. "Did you know about this?" she demanded. "No, Mom," Ore replied quickly. "I had no idea." Her mother threw her hands up in frustration. "Darasimi is trying to disgrace this family. She's trying to bring shame to us." Ore watched as her mother continued to shout. Feeling helpless, she had no idea what to do. She went back to her room and tried calling Darasimi, but her phone was switched off. Ore could only imagine the trouble that would come when their father found out. Later that morning, their father returned home from Abuja. As soon as he heard the news, the whole house seemed to shake with his anger. He could not believe that Darasimi had disobeyed him like this. Their father was a strict man, and he did not like anyone going against his wishes. As Ore stood in the living room, watching her parents argue and shout, she felt a heavy weight in her heart. The marriage between her family and the Ayegbajeje was very important, and now everything was at risk. What would happen to their family business? Would Adetola and his family call off the deal because of Darasimi had run away? Ore felt lost in the middle of it all. She knew her family's future was in trouble, and she didn't know what would happen next. Would Darasimi come back? Would their parents forgive her? Would the wedding still go on? These questions swirled around in Ore's mind as she stood silently, watching the storm of emotions in her family unfold. Darasimi and Toby were now married. They had just left the place where they had signed the papers with two strangers as witnesses. These strangers were not friends or family. Toby had paid them to be there. They did this because Darasimi's parents wanted her to marry another man named Adetola. But Darasimi did not love Adetola. She loved Toby, and Toby loved her too. So they made a plan to run away, get married in secret, and come back as husband and wife after the date for the wedding with Adetola had passed. Now they were driving far away from the city of a quiet place where no one would find them. They planned to stay there until the day Darasimi was supposed to marry Adetola. After that day, they would return, and it would be too late for Darasimi's parents to force her into the marriage. But as they drove, Darasimi started to feel scared. She looked at Toby and asked, "Are you sure no one will find us?" Toby smiled and said, "Don't worry, Darasimi. I told you before, I made sure that no one can track us. I used a different name when I made the arrangement for where we were going." "I hope you're right," Darasimi replied. "I know I will have to face my parents someday, but I just don't want them to find us before the day I'm supposed to marry Adetola." Toby squeezed her hand and said, "I promise you, everything will be okay. We just need to lay low for a little while, and then we'll be free." As they drove further, the tall buildings and the busy streets of the city slowly disappeared, replaced by trees, bushes, and quiet roads. Jarasimi looked out of the window at the green fields and forest, feeling nervous. She didn't know what would happen next, but she trusted Toby. She had to trust him because she had left everything behind for him. After a long drive, they turned onto a narrow gravel road. The car bounced a little as the tires rolled over the rough path. The place they were going to was a small house hidden away from the main road. The sun was setting, and soon the only light came from the car's headlights. Finally, they reached the house. Toby parked the car and got out first. He walked to Darasimi's side and opened her door. "Come on, let's check out our new home," he said. The house was small but cozy. It had a kitchen, a living room, and one bedroom. Toby showed Darasimi around. He opened the cupboards and the fridge, showing her the food and supplies he had bought. There were canned goods, bread, water, and even a few snacks. "We have everything we need here," Toby said. "We can stay here until it's safe to go back or until we decide what to do next." Darasimi looked around the house. It was simple, but it was enough for them. She walked over to the window and looked outside. It was dark now, and all she could see were trees and the shadows of the forest. The quietness made her feel a little uneasy, but she knew this was the only way to be with Toby. As they sat down to eat a simple meal, Darasimi couldn't help but ask, "Toby, do you ever think about what it will be like when we go back? When we have to face everyone?" Toby was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I think about it all the time, but we did this because we love each other. We'll face whatever comes our way together." Hearing Toby's words, Darasimi felt a little better. She knew they had done the right thing, even if it meant hiding for now. She smiled at him, grateful for his support. Meanwhile, back in the city, Adetola was in his room when his phone rang. He looked at the screen and saw it was his father calling. "Hello, Dad," Adetola answered. "Adetola, we have a problem." His father said, "You need to come to the Akinolas. Right now, there's an issue with the wedding." Adetola quickly got dressed and prepared to leave. But as he was getting ready, Tiwa, his girlfriend, spoke up. "Are you really going to leave me now? We were supposed to spend evening together." "I'm sorry, Tiwa," Adetola said, "but this is important. My father needs me to handle something about the wedding." Tiwa crossed her arms and frowned. "You're always choosing your family's business over me. You say you love me, but you are marrying someone else." "I've told you before, Tiwa," Adetola replied. "Once the wedding is over and the business deal is done, I will divorce Darasimi and we can be together." Tiwa didn't look convinced. "How do I know you will keep your promise? What if you start to care for her?" "Trust me, Tiwa," Adetola said. "I only care about you." Tiwa shook her head, but she didn't say anything more. Adetola quickly left the house and drove to the Akinola's mansion. At the Akinola's house, the mood was tense. Darasimi's parents were worried and angry. They had just found out that Darasimi had run away. The family sat together, trying to figure out what to do. Chief Akinola, Darasimi's father, was pacing back and forth. "We cannot cancel the wedding," he said firmly. "It would be too embarrassing. Everyone knows about the wedding. If we cancel it, people will laugh at us." Adetola's father nodded in agreement. "We must find Darasimi before it's too late." But even as they talked about searching for Darasimi, Adetola's mother, Aunty Abike, had a different idea. She whispered something to her husband, and he thought about it for a moment. Then he quickly walked over to Chief Akinola and whispered in his ear. Chief Akinola looked surprised at first. Then he glanced over at his other daughter, Oreoluwa, who was sitting quietly in the corner. Ore noticed her father looking at her, and she felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt uneasy. As the men continued to whisper, the doorbell rang. The staff opened the door, and Adetola walked in. He greeted everyone politely, then turned to his father. "Dad, what's the problem?" His father motioned for him to sit down. "Son, there's a situation. Darasimi has run away with her boyfriend. Adetola raised an eyebrow. She left me for that guy. Well, I guess that's her loss. Can I go now? Adetola, you don't understand. His father said, this is a serious problem for the business. If the wedding doesn't happen, it could ruin everything. Adetola sighed. So what do you want me to do about it? We've come up with a solution. His father said, Oreoluwa, we take Darasimi's place. Oreoluwa froze. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. They wanted her to marry Adetola in Darasimi's place. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she felt like the walls were closing in around her. Adetola stood in the center of the room, utterly shocked. He initially thought it was a joke, but the serious expressions on his parents' faces and the nodding agreement of Ore's parents indicated otherwise. He turned to look at Ore, who was unable to meet his gaze, still processing the bombshell that had just been dropped. No way, Dad, Tola protested. I agreed to this agreement partially because the marriage is with Darasimi, but there is no way you can force me to marry her sister. We have nothing in common. I will not do it. With those words, he stormed out of the house. The parents watched him leave, making no move to stop him. Ore then confronted her parents. How can you do this? Agreeing to replace me for Dara. Dad, who does that? You can't make such a decision without consulting me first. You talk as if you have many options. When have you ever brought a man home? Her mother retorted sharply. Despite the sting of the mother's words, Ore persisted. Even so, you should have discussed it with me. You can't just marry me off to a man who clearly despises me. That is our decision, and you have to abide by it, her father declared firmly. Dad, Mom, Ore pleaded, seeking some understanding. You have to do whatever your father says, her mother said. The Ayegbas then stood up. Don't worry about our son. He will come around. We will take our leave now, they assured as Ore's parents escorted them out. Ore, feeling overwhelmed by the unfolding events, retreated to her room. This cannot be happening, she thought, grappling with the reality of the situation. She was set to marry the man she had once admired, but who had treated her disdainfully all her life. Overwhelmed, she contemplated running away but quickly realized she had nowhere to go where her father wouldn't find her. Instead, she turned to prayer. Kneeling, Ore began to pray for divine guidance. As she closed her eyes, memories flooded her mind, taking her back to their old school days. She remembered the courage it had taken to approach Adetola, hoping he would speak to his girlfriend who had been bullying her. When she asked him for a moment of his time, his response was dismissive and cold. What could you possibly want to talk to me about? He had said sharply. Please, it won't take a few minutes. She stuttered, her voice barely above a whisper. His friends were there, snickering and mocking her. I don't have time to talk to you, and don't you ever stop me again to ask for a chat. Come on guys, let's go. He had brushed her off completely, never once giving her any attention. Later, when she returned home for the holidays and they met at events and parties, he only acknowledged her sister Dara and never said a word to her. It was as if he despised her. Ore sighed deeply and continued her prayer. It wasn't long before her mother entered the room and found her on her knees. What are you doing? Her mother asked. Nothing, Mom, she lied, knowing well that praying was forbidden in their home where idol worship was the norm. Look, it's not as bad as you think. This deal with the Ayegbas is very important to your father. We need to keep the business in the family. Don't worry. If things don't work out, you can leave after 2 years, but you must bear him a son. That son will be the link between our families, her mother explained. 2 years, Mom? And what? What if I don't have a child, or specifically a son? It's in your best interest that you do, her mother coldly replied. Why is it that you never stand up for me, but you will always do anything for Darasimi? Because you are my eldest daughter, and I need you to be strong. You are too weak, always lacking confidence. Now get ready, we are going hunting for a wedding dress. Ore couldn't hold back her tears as she realized that her dreams, aspirations, and freedom were being sacrificed for her sister's happiness and the prosperity of their family business. She was tired of being unappreciated at home, a sentiment that extended to her professional life as well. Despite her qualifications and experience, which suited her for the CEO position, her father had passed her over in favor of her younger brother, simply because he was a man. Instead, she was relegated to a mundane job that didn't even require her to use her intellect. Later that day, Ore's mother dragged her from one bridal shop to another in search of the perfect wedding dress. After hours of trying on various gowns, her mother selected one she deemed ideal for Ore. Ore hated the dress, but her opinion seemed inconsequential as usual. The following day being Sunday, Ore left her house under the pretense of going to the gym, but instead drove to her friend Temi's place. Temi was already waiting for her. Ore changed into her Sunday attire, and together they headed to church. Attending church service was something Ore had to do in secrecy due to her family's strict adherence to traditional worship, a tradition that spanned generations. During the drive, Ore confided in Temi about the soap opera her life had become. Temi expressed sympathy, but there was little she could do to change Ore's situation. After the church service, Ore spoke with the pastor, sharing her predicament. The pastor prayed for her, assuring her of God's presence and support. He expressed conviction that the path she was about to embark on would be challenging but necessary for her self-recovery. He encouraged her not to lose faith, but to continue praying and trusting in God's plans for her life. Throughout the week, frantic last-minute wedding preparations took place. Ore was left in the dark about whether Adetola would actually attend the wedding. There was no communication between them. To her surprise, she found him at the registry on the wedding day, his parents apparently having persuaded him to come. The ceremony itself was brief. Adetola, tall and impeccably dressed, presented himself with an air of authority, yet remained emotionally detached. He was polite but distant, his expression giving away nothing of his thoughts or feelings towards Ore, the woman he was marrying. The ceremony was a blur to Ore, with the words of commitment and union sounding like distant echoes. She played her part, repeating vows that felt hollow, promising to cherish a man who had openly shown his disdain for her. Throughout the ceremony, he never once looked at her. When the court official suggested the kiss, Tola shot her a sharp look, prompting a quick move to the next item on the agenda. At the reception, while guests drank and celebrated, Ore was enveloped in misery. She mechanically moved through the motions, her smile a carefully maintained facade. Adetola, on the other hand, played the role of the consummate businessman, engaging eagerly in conversation about future plans and potential deals. Interest he never extended towards his new wife. Ore wondered what leverage his parents held over him to coerce him into this arranged marriage. As the guests thinned out, a deep sense of isolation washed over Ore. She was now officially married, tied to a man who regarded her as merely a necessary inconvenience. The reality of her new life just began to weigh heavily on her as they prepared to leave for Tola's house, a place she had never been, a place that was now supposed to be her home. The car ride to Tola's house was quiet. Ore sat in the back, looking out the window as the tall buildings and busy streets of the city moved past her. She felt far away from her old life, and a deep sadness settled in her heart. The car finally stopped in front of a big shiny house that looked very fancy. Adetola opened the door and motioned for her to come in. The house was large and modern, but it felt cold. There were no smiling faces, no laughter, just silence. He showed her to her new room, which was beautiful but felt empty. "This is your room," Tola said finally, breaking the silence. "We will both have our own spaces." Ore watched him leave. He seemed distant and uninterested, and she was left alone, sitting on the edge of the soft bed. She felt the weight of her new life pressing down on her. She was married but felt very much alone. She wished for comfort and connection, but only found silence and uncertainty. Even though her heart was heavy, Ore managed to sleep that night. When morning came, her alarm woke her up. She got ready for the trip to the airport. They were supposed to go on their honeymoon, a journey planned by their families. Ore felt a bitter smile creep onto her face. Did they really think a nice hotel could change the fact that Tola didn't want to be near her? A few minutes before 6 a.m., Ore rolled her suitcase down the stairs and waited for Tola. When he finally appeared, they left the house without a word. The car ride to the airport was once again silent. When they boarded the plane, Ore felt an ache in her chest, a loneliness that filled the space between them. The flights felt long and empty, and Ore tried to sleep but couldn't shake the feeling of despair. When they landed in Dubai and cleared immigration, Ore and Tola picked up their bags just as they were about to leave. A man came over to help. He took Ore's suitcase, but when he reached for Tola's, Tola pulled away. "This is where we part ways," Tola said, leaving Ore confused. "What do you mean?" Ore asked, her heart aching. "I have other plans. He will take you to the hotel. Enjoy your time there. We will meet in a week to go home," Tola said coldly. Before Ore could say anything, Tola turned and walked away. Then a woman named Tiwa came up to him, and they hugged. Ore stood frozen, watching them live together, her heart sinking further into despair. The man took Ore to the hotel. When she stepped inside, she saw the honeymoon suite, decorated with flowers and champagne. It was beautiful, but all she felt was loneliness. Tears streamed down her face as she thought about her life. Her father was always busy, and her mother never really understood her. She had never felt very close to her siblings either. It struck her hard that even far away in a new place, she was utterly alone. After crying for a while, Ore decided that she would go back to Nigeria the next day. She would stay with her friend Temi until it was time to return home. Just then, her phone rang. It was Temi calling on WhatsApp. "Hi Ore, did you get there safely?" Temi asked cheerfully. "Yes, but it's not good," Ore replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Did you cry?" Temi asked, noticing her tone. "A bit," Ore admitted, wiping her tears. "What happened?" Temi pressed on. Ore explained everything that had happened since arriving in Dubai. "That is so unfair. How can he leave you alone on your honeymoon? Some men are just terrible. What are you going to do?" Temi said, her voice rising in anger. "I'm thinking of going back tomorrow," Ore replied. "No, you should stay and have some fun. Think of it as a vacation," Temi encouraged. "I can't have fun alone," Ore said sadly. "Of course you can. You deserve to enjoy this trip. So will you stay?" "Only if you promise to come here," Ore replied, a little spark of hope lighting her heart. "I can't afford a ticket right now, Ore." "Who said you have to pay? I will send you a ticket tomorrow," Ore said, a smile creeping onto her face. "Really? Wow. I'm going to Dubai?" Temi asked with joy. "This is going to be so much fun." After chatting a bit more, Ore had to end the call because of the time difference. That night, as Ore lay in bed, she felt the confusion of her heart. She couldn't blame her sister Dara for choosing love, but that choice had turned Ore's life upside down. She felt lost and unsure about what would happen next. Yet, deep down, Ore held onto her faith, believing that God would help her find her way out of this darkness. With that thought, she drifted off to sleep, dreaming of better days ahead, hoping that tomorrow would bring a new beginning. The next day, Temi arrived early in the morning. Ore was so happy to see her friend. Together, they decided to join the hotel's tourism program. Ore felt excited. Dubai was a beautiful city, and they were ready to explore it. Every morning, they would leave their hotel and go on adventures. For 2 days, they visited many exciting places. They stood in awe of the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. Every morning, they would leave their hotel and go on adventures. For 2 days, they visited many exciting places. They stood in awe of the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. It reached high in the sky, and Ore felt small beside it. At the Dubai Mall, they enjoyed shopping. The mall was enormous, with so many shops to choose from. They bought colorful souvenirs to remember their trip. In the evenings, they went to nice restaurants. They tasted different food from all over the world, from spicy dishes to sweet desserts. Every day brought new experiences, and Ore felt happy to be with Temi. On the third day, Ore and Temi decided to sleep in after staying out too late night before. They woke up at noon, feeling refreshed. They talked about what to do next and agreed to visit the mall again. But first, they wanted to eat brunch at a cafe. As they enjoyed their meal, Temi leaned in closer and whispered, "Don't look now, but there's a guy who has been watching you since we got here." "Me? No way. I never attract that kind of attention," Ore replied, feeling shy. "Well, he's looking at you right now. You've been so relaxed since we got away from home. Plus, you look beautiful in that dress. I could never wear this back home. My mom would have a heart attack." Ore laughed. Suddenly, Temi said, "He's coming over. Don't look." Ore felt nervous and tried to keep her eyes on her plate. A shadow loomed over them, and she quietly turned her head. "Hello, my name is Farouk. I noticed you girls are from Nigeria," the man said with a friendly smile. "How can you tell?" Temi asked, intrigued. "I heard you speaking pidgin," he replied, grinning. "Do you mind if I join you, ladies?" "Sure," Temi answered cheerfully. Farouk sat down, his gaze focused on Ore. She felt uncomfortable under his stare. "Hello," he said to her directly. Ore felt shy and managed to give him a stiff smile. "So Farouk, what brings you to Dubai?" Temi asked, trying to keep the conversation going. "A much needed vacation," he said, still looking at Ore. "And how is that going?" Temi continued. "Up until now, quite boring," he admitted. "I didn't catch your names," he said, shifting his attention back to them. "I'm Temidayo, but my friends call me Temi. This is my friend Oreoluwa, Ore for short," Temi introduced them. Oreoluwa, God's gift, a beautiful name for a beautiful woman, Farouk complimented, making Ore blush. "So, what brings you girls here all by yourselves?" he asked. "We are on vacation, just like you," Temi answered, smiling. "Great, then allow me to be your tour guide." "I have 3 more days before my vacation ends," Farouk offered. "That sounds wonderful. I leave tomorrow night, but Ore here stays until the weekend," Temi said. "Good, then finish your food and let's hit the road," Farouk suggested eagerly. After he spoke, Ore suddenly lost her appetite. Farouk paid for their meal and they all left together. As they walked, Ore pulled Temis aside. "Why did you invite him to come along?" she whispered. "Why not? The more the merrier. Plus, it seems like he likes you," Temi said, grinning. "I'm married, remember," Ore replied, feeling uneasy. "Where is your husband?" Didn't he abandon you here to follow another woman? You don't have to do anything with him. Just enjoy the attention, Temi insisted. And you think that's all he wants? I know when a man wants more from a woman, Ore said, feeling anxious. Would that really be such okay? Would that really be such a bad thing? Temi asked, raising her eyebrows. Yes, I'm a Christian, Ore said firmly. I'm a Christian too, Temi replied with a chuckle. Temi, you are going to get me into trouble. We have to stop this now before it gets out of hand, Ore insisted. Just then, Farouk called out to them. Hey ladies, what's causing the delay? We are coming, Temi called back, then whispered to Ore. You don't have to do anything, just enjoy the attention. Ore tried to enjoy the attention, but it felt strange. Farouk was very kind and helpful. He did things for her without being asked and even bought her gifts before the day ended. Ore felt confused. They all ended up having dinner together. By then, Ore had relaxed a bit. Farouk was good company and made them laugh. I've planned a trip to Abu Dhabi tomorrow. Don't worry, Temi. We'll be back in time for you to catch your flight, he said with excitement. Excellent, thank you. I really had fun today, Temi replied happily. I'm glad to hear that. And you, Ore, did you enjoy yourself today? Farouk asked, looking at her. Yeah, it was fun. How did you come to know Dubai so well? Ore asked, curious. I've been coming here on vacation since I was young, he explained. So, what do you girls do? Their conversation continued into the night, and by 10 p.m., they said goodnight and returned to their hotel room. Once in their room, Temi couldn't stop talking about Farouk. He's so handsome, his smile is charming, and he seems to really like you, she exclaimed. Ore smiled but felt uneasy. Can we please just go to sleep? She asked, trying to quiet Temi down. Temi eventually fell asleep quickly, but Ore was wide awake. She felt conflicted. She had never met someone like Farouk before. Yes, he was handsome and seemed interested in her, but she wasn't comfortable. She noticed other girls giving him looks and wondered if something was wrong with him or if he was a spy sent by her father. That night, Ore struggled to sleep. Farouk appeared in her dreams, whispering sweet things, and they ended up together in her room. Then in the dream, Adetola walked in on them and a fight happened. She woke up with a start, realizing it was just a dream. Frightened, she thought to herself, God help me, I have to be careful. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything. What will happen next? She wondered. Despite all her fears, she knew she had to be strong. The world felt big and scary, but Ore was determined to find her way. As morning arrived, Ore took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. She knew she had to be careful, but also wanted to enjoy her time in Dubai. With Temi by her side, she felt a little braver. As the sun began to rise, Ore felt hopeful for the day ahead. She prayed, asking God to guide her and help her find joy in her new surroundings. And with that thought, she drifted off in a peaceful sleep, dreaming of possibilities. Darasimi and Toby had made a big decision. They loved each other and wanted to fight for their love. They decided it was time to face Darasimi's parents. The night before, they packed their bags and got ready for the next day. They planned to leave in the morning. Suddenly, they woke up to loud banging on their door. Darasimi looked at Toby with wide eyes. Who could it be? She wondered. She felt sure it was her father. Get dressed and go answer the door. I will change in the bathroom, she told Toby quickly. We aren't expecting anyone, Toby said quietly, still half asleep. I think it's my father. Open the door before they break it down, Darasimi urged. Toby nodded slowly. Darasimi hurried to the bathroom and Toby reluctantly walked to the door. When he opened it, he saw Ope, one of Chief Akinola's men. Where is she? Okpe asked angrily. She is safe, Toby said, trying to block Okpe from coming in. Okpe pushed past Toby and entered the room. You can't just come in here, Toby protested. But Okpe ignored him and turned to face Darasimi. I'm trying to keep this peaceful, so just tell me where she is, Okpe said firmly. Darasimi stepped out of the bathroom, her hair still damp. I'm here, Okpe. What do you want? You know why I'm here. Let's not make this harder than it had been. Toby, grab our bags, Darasimi said, her voice steady. Toby hesitated. We can't just let them take us. Toby, please. We need to stick to our plan. Toby nodded, understanding the seriousness of the moment. He went to get their bags, and soon they were all loading into separate cars. Meanwhile, Ore was sleeping peacefully when her phone rang. She answered and heard that Farouk was waiting for her in the reception area. Surprised, she wondered why he was there. She remembered he had promised to take them out for a tour. Feeling excited, Ore jumped out of bed and got ready quickly. As she put on her clothes, she felt a mix of excitement and nerves. She had never had a man show interest in her like this before. Even though her mind told her to end this with him, her heart wanted to enjoy this feeling of being admired. When Ore stepped into the reception, she saw Farouk waiting for her. He stood up and walked toward her, smiling. "Hello, beautiful," he said, making Ore blush. She was thankful for her dark skin, which hid her rosy cheeks. Today, she wore a new dress Temi had helped her pick. It showed off her figure more than she was used to. "Good morning," she managed to say, trying to hide her shyness. "Have you had breakfast?" Farouk asked, still smiling. "No, I was just about to go to the restaurant. Would you like to join me?" He smiled politely. "How about we go somewhere more special?" He took her hand gently, leading her away from the luxury of the Burj Al Arab. They walked to a cozy cafe tucked away in the lively city. The place felt warm and inviting, with the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods filling the air. They found a quiet corner and settled down. The breakfast was a treat: soft scrambled eggs, fresh avocado, and a bowl of colorful berries. They also had strong, rich coffee and sweet orange juice. As they ate, Ore felt relaxed for the first time in a long time. She savored each bite, laughing at Farouk's jokes. It felt wonderful to be happy. The sun streamed through the mirror, making the moment feel magical. After breakfast, they wandered through the bustling markets, where colorful spices and fabrics surrounded them. They joked as they haggled over small trinkets. The laughter brought them closer, and they enjoyed each moment together. As they went on, they found a peaceful park where they could sit and watch the sunset. They spread out a soft blanket and lay down, talking about anything and everything. Ore felt light and free, lost in the moment. In the evening, Farouk suggested they visit a lively dance club known for its fun atmosphere. Ore hesitated but felt brave. She wanted to try something new. They returned to Ore's hotel, changed, and then headed out together. The club was bright and alive with dancing lights and happy music. The energy pulled them in, and they found themselves dancing closely. The world around them seemed to disappear. After dancing for a long time, they took a break at the bar. The drinks were sweet and made them feel happy and carefree. With the music in the background and the excitement of the day, their emotions soared. Eventually, they went back to Ore's hotel room. As they crossed the threshold, the chemistry between them was undeniable. They kissed, and their passion grew stronger. That night, they made love, celebrating their unexpected bond. When morning came, Ore woke up and felt something was different. The sunlight poured into the room, warming her skin. But when she looked around, she found she was alone. Farouk had left without saying goodbye. Ore's heart sank as memories of the night flooded back. She couldn't believe she had broken her marriage vow. It felt wrong, and she felt vulnerable and lost. If only Adetola had been there, she thought this wouldn't have happened. Feeling ashamed, Ore grabbed her phone and called the reception to ask about Farouk. As he checked out, she asked. The receptionist confirmed that he had. Ore sighed, realizing he was gone. She didn't even know his last name. A part of her felt relieved, but another part missed the excitement he had brought into her life. Perhaps, she thought, it was better this way. As Ore sat in silence, reflecting on the whirlwind of emotions, she wondered if this was the end of her adventure or just the beginning of something new. The sun shone brightly outside, signaling a new day full of possibilities. Since Darasimi was locked in her room, she had no idea where Toby was. She hadn't seen her father since she returned home, and her mother had only come once to express disappointment. Darasimi had always thought her mother loved her, but now it seemed even her mother had turned away. After that brief visit, Darasimi was locked in her room, and no one had come to see her. Her phone had been taken, so she couldn't call anyone. She had no way to contact Toby, and the thought of what her father might be doing to him terrified her. Darasimi had hoped that her father, who always called her his princess, would change his mind. In the past, whenever she got into trouble, he would find a way to forgive her. But this time, it seemed different. This time, he was serious, and Darasimi was scared. She didn't know what her father was capable of, but his anger was not something she could ignore. As the hours passed, she grew weaker. She hadn't eaten or had anything to drink since she got home. The hunger and taste made her feel dizzy, and her stomach ached. She tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Toby, and she wondered where he was and if he was safe. When evening came, Darasimi finally heard the sound of the key turning in the lock. Her heart raced as he saw her father walk into the room. Behind him was Ope, the man who had always followed her father like a shadow. Her father threw a document onto the bed, and when Darasimi opened it, her eyes widened in shock. It was an annulment paper. Toby had already signed it, which meant he agreed to end their marriage. Darasimi's hand shook as she held the paper. Her father's voice was cold as he spoke. I thought you and your brother would make me proud, but I was wrong. You are selfish. I have spoiled you too much, and now you have embarrassed me. You will pay for this. As for that foolish boy, I offered him money, and he took it. You will never see him again. Darasimi's heart sank. She couldn't believe that Toby would take money in exchange for her love. Her father turned and left the room, and she heard the key turn in the lock once again. She felt alone and helpless. How could her father do this? How could he just throw away everything she cared about? Darasimi collapsed onto the floor, tears streaming down her face. Her world was crumbling, and she didn't know how to fix it. Meanwhile, in Dubai, Ore was still in her hotel room. It was her last day, and she couldn't stop thinking about the events of the previous night. Every time she remembered what had happened, guilt filled her heart. She knelt by her bed and prayed, asking God for forgiveness. Ore missed Farouk, even though she didn't understand how a few days with him could make her feel this way. She had tried to push him out of her mind, but it was impossible. The next morning, Ore left the hotel. She wasn't sure if Adetola would be at the airport, but when she entered the VIP lounge, she saw him sitting there. He was alone, and he barely looked at her. When their flight was called, They boarded the plane and sat in separate seats, just like when they had traveled to Dubai. Ore felt uneasy. She knew things would be different now, but she wasn't sure how. Back at home, Darasimi woke up after a troubled sleep. She glanced at the documents her father had thrown at her the day before. The reality of the situation hit her hard. Her father wanted her to sign the document papers, but she didn't want to. She loved Toby, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. But the signature on the paper said otherwise. Toby had already signed it, agreeing to end their marriage. Darasimi wondered if her father had threatened him or if the money was too tempting for him to resist. She felt weak from hunger and thirst, but she knew her mother wouldn't come to help her. Darasimi managed to drag herself to the bathroom. She brushed her teeth and splashed water on her face, trying to feel a little better. But when she returned to the bed, her mind was still full of worry. What was she going to do? Could she fight her father? She didn't think so. Just then, she heard the key turn again. Her father entered the room, and Ope was with him, as always. His voice was stern as he asked, "Have you signed the document?" Darasimi's voice was weak. "Dad, don't call me that," her father snapped. "You've lost the right to call me dad. How dare you embarrass me like this? I raised you to put family first, but you betrayed us. And for what? A gold digger?" "Toby is not a gold digger," Darasimi replied softly. "Then why did he take the money I offered him?" her father asked, his eyes cold. "I don't believe you," Darasimi whispered, shaking her head. "Believe what you want," her father said harshly. "I still have Toby. If you don't sign those papers in the next 2 hours, I will make sure you never see him again. He will be gone forever." Darasimi couldn't believe her ears. Her father was threatening to hurt Toby. She didn't know what to do. As her father and Ope left the room, Darasimi sat on the bed, feeling lost. She had always thought her father loved her, but now she wasn't so sure. This man who spoke of paying off people and threatening lives was not the father she remembered. Meanwhile, Farouk had already returned home. His mother was relieved to see him, but Farouk didn't seem like himself. "Mother, I told you I'm fine," Farouk said as he sat down. "How can you be fine? You went off alone, and anything could have happened to you." His mother replied, worried. Farouk shrugged. "What could have happened? I could have died, but that wouldn't have made any difference." His mother's eyes filled with tears. "Please don't talk like that, Farouk. Don't give up. I know that God will heal you." Farouk didn't say anything for a moment. Then he sighed and said, "I'm not afraid of dying, mother. When I die, I'll be with God, and that's a better place." "Please don't say that," his mother begged. "I have faith that you will get better." Farouk was quiet again. His mother tried to change the subject. "So how was Dubai? You've always longed going there. Did you enjoy yourself?" Farouk hesitated before answering. "I met someone," he finally said. "You did?" His mother asked, surprised. "Who is she?" Farouk shook his head. "It doesn't matter. It was just a one-night thing." His mother frowned. "Farouk, you didn't go all the way to Dubai just to sleep with someone, did you?" "No, not exactly," Farouk replied. "But when I saw her, I couldn't stop myself. I broke my years of celibacy." "That's a sin, Farouk," his mother said softly. "I know, and I've made peace with God about it. It's just, she reminded me of you, and I think that's why I was drawn to her." His mother didn't know what to say. Farouk turned to her and said, "Don't worry, mother. When I'm gone, you will still have my sister." His mother's eyes filled with tears again. She didn't want to think about losing her son. "Did you at least use protection?" she asked quietly. Farouk looked away, avoiding her gaze. "Haba, Farouk," his mother cried. In the days that followed after Ore moved into Adetola's house, things were not as smooth as she had hoped. Adetola was always busy with work. He would leave the house very early in the morning and come back very late at night. Sometimes it felt like he was not even there. Ore, on the other hand, tried her best to get used to her new home. The house was big and quiet, and it made her feel lonely. It felt more like a museum than a place to live. Ore was still thinking about Farouk, the man she met during her honeymoon. She tried not to think about him, but it was hard. She knew she was married now, and it was wrong to think about another man. But just as she was feeling lost, something exciting happened. One day, barely a week after her honeymoon, Ore got a call from her professor at Harvard. He told her that a big company was looking for a financial analyst, and he had recommended her for the job. The best part was that the job could be done from home, so she didn't need to go to an office. Ore felt so happy. She hadn't been able to work because of her father wanted her to stay at home and take care of her new family. But now, she had a chance to work from home, and she couldn't wait to get started. Right away, she called her best friend Temi to share the good news. Temi was just as excited and promised to come over later that day to celebrate. Meanwhile, Darasimi, Ore's sister, was going through a tough time. She had just signed papers to cancel her marriage to Toby. She didn't want to do it, but her father forced her to, so that Toby would not be in trouble. Darasimi missed Toby so much. She couldn't believe he had betrayed her. She thought their love was real, but now she was left feeling empty and angry at everyone around her. Darasimi's father had not allowed her to leave the house since she returned home. She was stuck inside, with no phone or internet to talk to anyone. Her mother tried to make her feel better, but Darasimi was too sad. She couldn't believe her mother didn't stand up for her. Instead, her mother supported everything her father did, which made Darasimi feel even more hurt. As days passed, Darasimi spent most of her time alone in her room, staring out the window. She had no one to talk to, and her thoughts kept getting sober. She felt like she was in a prison, even though her house was big and beautiful. She couldn't stop thinking about Toby. How could he take money to leave her? Was their love not real? These thoughts kept her awake at night and filled her days with sadness. Darasimi knew she needed to do something to change her life, but she didn't know where to start. Later that evening, Temi came to visit Ore. They had a lovely dinner with lots of delicious food made by the chef, and even had some wine to celebrate Ore's job opportunity. After dinner, they went to Ore's room to talk. Temi asked Ore how things were here with her husband, Adetola. Ore told her that nothing had changed. Adetola still barely spoke to her, and sometimes he didn't come home at all. She thought he was probably spending time with his girlfriend Tiwa. Temi didn't like hearing this. She said that Adetola needed to remember that he was married now and that Tiwa had no business with someone else's husband. Ore wasn't sure what to do. She didn't know how she was supposed to get pregnant if Adetola didn't even come near her. Temi had an idea. She suggested that they go shopping over the weekend to buy some nice clothes that would make Ore feel more confident. Temi wanted Ore to feel good about herself, even if she wasn't happy in her marriage. Ore laughed and said Temi was a bad influence, but she agreed that they could go shopping together. Temi also asked about Ore's meeting with the company. Ore told her that she had a call scheduled for the next day, and she was excited to see what would happen. Temi then asked about Farouk, the man Ore had met on her honeymoon. Ore became uncomfortable and said she didn't want to talk about him. Temi tried to ask more questions, but Ore made it clear that she didn't want to discuss it anymore. She knew it wasn't right to think about another man while she was married, even if her marriage was difficult. Meanwhile, Adetola was with Tiwa, his girlfriend. They were having a quiet evening together when Tiwa asked him about his marriage. She wanted to know what his plans was. She was tired of hiding and waiting for him to be free. She knew that once Ore got pregnant, the marriage would be over and they could be together. But Adetola wasn't sure how to make that happen. He didn't want to be close to Ore, and that thought of having a baby with her made him uncomfortable. Tiwa wasn't happy with Adetola's answer. She felt that if he really loved her, he would do whatever it took to end the marriage. Adetola said he was trying to figure out a solution, like using artificial insemination or finding a surrogate. But Tiwa wasn't satisfied. She wanted him to act quickly so they could stop sneaking around. After Temi left, Ore felt the need to call her mother. She was upset that her mother hadn't called to check up on her since she got married. When her mother answered the phone, Ore expressed how hurt she was. She reminded her mother that it was her parents who had pushed her into the marriage. Her mother didn't seem to care much. She told Ore that she was tired of her children blaming her for their problems. She said they were grown-ups now that they needed to deal with their own problems. Ore then asked about her sister Darasimi. Her mother admitted that Darasimi was back home and that her father had ended her marriage to Toby. Ore was shocked. She had always thought that her father loved Darasimi more. So for him to treat her this way meant something serious had happened. But her mother didn't want to talk anymore. She ended the call, leaving Ore to wonder what had gone wrong. Ore decided that she would visit Darasimi the next day, after her meeting with the company. She wanted to support her sister and find out what had really happened. By 10 a.m. the next morning, Ore was ready for work. She had set up her workspace in her room, with her computer on desk and everything in place. Just in time, a notification popped up on her screen. It was the video call from Ecclesia, and Ore quickly joined the meeting. She clicked on the link she had received and waited for the call to connect. On the screen, Titilope, the lady who had been communicating with Ore, appeared. She smiled warmly and greeted Ore. The two of them had a long discussion about Ore's job, the company's goals, and what was expected from her. The meeting went well, and Titilope mentioned that Ore would soon meet the managing director, Mr. Francis, once he was available. After the call ended, Ore felt a sense of satisfaction and excitement. The opportunity seemed like a good one. Ore didn't waste any time. After the meeting, she started her task immediately. She began organizing her schedule, setting up the files she needed, and familiarizing herself with the company's systems. She reached out to her new colleagues, introducing herself and making sure she was connected to everyone she would be working with. It felt good to be part of something new and important. By evening, Ore felt accomplished. She had spent the whole day working hard, and it felt good. As she reflected on her day, she realized this job was not just a new career step. It was also a chance for her to take control of her life. Her troubled marriage and personal struggles were heavy on her mind, but this job gave her a way to focus on something positive. It was a fresh start, and Ore was ready to embrace it. The next step for Ore was preparing for her upcoming meeting with Mr. Francis, the managing director. She knew she had to be well prepared. She decided to spend the next day researching Alexia's recent projects and understanding more about how her role would help the company. Ore was determined to make a good impression when she finally met Mr. Francis. Later that evening, Ore decided to visit her sister Darasimi. When she entered Darasimi's room, she saw her sister sitting on the couch, looking sad and lost. Ore sat beside her, feeling sorry for Darasimi but unsure of what to say. "Dara, how are you?" Ore asked softly. Darasimi didn't look at her. Instead, she said, "I'm fine." But Ore knew she wasn't fine. Ore had heard what had happened to her sister. Chief Akinola, their father, had forced Darasimi to end her relationship with Toby, the man she loved. Ore felt bad for her sister, but knew there was nothing she could do to change the situation. "We are all victims of father," Ore said after a pause. "He controls everything, and we are left to pick up the pieces." Darasimi looked at her for the first time, but her eyes were full of tears. Ore put her arm around her sister and hugged her tightly. "You'll be okay, Dara," Ore whispered. "Just be strong." A few days later, Ore started her work. It's her first day working remotely, and there were many things to do. She had to fill out some forms, sign documents, and set up her official profile with the company. It was a busy day, but Ore enjoyed it. She felt like she was finally moving forward in her life. That evening, she hoped to have dinner with her husband, Adetola. Ore dressed up, wearing one of the dresses she had bought during her trip to Dubai. But when she went downstairs, the chef told her that Adetola wouldn't be home that night. Disappointed, Ore ate her dinner alone. As she ate, her mind drifted to memories of her time with Farouk. She thought about the breakfast they shared and the warmth she had felt with him. Ore had made a mistake with Farouk, and she knew it. She had crossed a line she never thought she would. Guilt weighed heavily on her, and she hadn't been able to pray since. Ore wanted to talk to her pastor, but the shame of what she had done held her back. She didn't know how to confess her sin, not even to herself. After dinner, Ore returned to her room and spent the rest of the night working. She needed to keep herself busy, to forget about the guilt and pain that followed her everywhere. A few nights later, Adetola was having dinner with his friend Jaye. After the meal, they went to the bar for drinks. Adetola looked troubled, and Jaye noticed. "What's wrong?" Jaye said. Adetola sighed. "It's Ore," he said. "I need to get her pregnant, but I can't." Jaye raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Adetola confessed. "I'm confused. I want to convince her to agree to artificial insemination or use a surrogate, but I will need your help." Jaye frowned. "How do I help with that?" "I want you to donate your sperm. I'll tell her it's from a donor, but it will be yours. It's the only way to get my father off my back." Jaye nodded slowly. "That's quite a plan," he said. "But do you think Ore will agree?" "I don't know," Adetola admitted, "but I have to try." Meanwhile, back at home, Darasimi was in her room when Chief Akintola visited her. He had news for her. She was to marry the son of one of his business associates. The wedding was to take place in 4 weeks. Darasimi was shocked, but Ore's words echoed in her mind. Chief Akintola always got his way, and no one ever stood up to him. Darasimi knew she was trapped, but deep inside, she felt something change. She wasn't going to let her father control her life any longer. She made a silent vow to herself. One day, she would make him pay for everything he had done to her and Toby. Ore had promised to take her friend Temi shopping, and today was the day. She had been looking forward to it. Temi was excited to help Ore pick out some new clothes, but her choices were bold and quite revealing. At first, Ore hesitated, but Temi convinced her to give them a try, saying they would make her look attractive. Ore decided to trust her friend and bought the outfit. A few days later, Ore got a message from the chef. He told her that Adetola, her husband, was going to have dinner at home that evening. Ore saw this as an opportunity to impress him, so she went to her closet and picked out one of the dresses Temi had encouraged her to buy. It was a beautiful but very bold dress, something she had never worn before. She hoped it would make Adetola see her differently. When she walked into the dining room, however, Adetola's reaction was far from what she expected. He looked at her with disgust, as if he didn't like what he saw. Ore was confused and hurt. Why did he look at her like that? She had hoped he would be pleased, but instead, he seemed upset. During dinner, Adetola didn't say much. He kept his distance, barely looking at Ore. She could tell he didn't like the way she dressed, but she didn't understand why. All she wanted was to get closer to him, but it seemed like everything she did pushed him further away. As they ate, Ore tried to figure out what was going on in her husband's mind. She watched him closely, noticing small things about him. Sometimes he seemed gentle, like when he carefully cut his food. But then, other times, he became distant, especially when he got a phone call from someone named Jaye. Ore had no idea who Jaye was, but the way Adetola spoke to him made her curious. After dinner, Ore tried to talk to Adetola. She wanted to know if there was any chance they could become a real couple, like a husband and wife should be. But before she could say much, Adetola stood up and left the house without saying a word. Ore was left sitting at the table, feeling alone and confused. She didn't know what else to do. How could they ever start a family if they couldn't even talk to each other? That night, Ore went to bed feeling sad. She cried quietly, thinking about everything that had gone wrong between her and Adetola. In her dreams, she saw Farouk, her old friend, smiling at her. He told her everything would be okay, but when she woke up, she wasn't so sure. The next morning, Ore got a call from her father. He asked her to come to his office. Ore didn't want to go, but she knew she had to go. When she arrived, her father didn't waste any time. "So how are things with you and Adetola?" he asked. Ore knew where this was going, but she didn't want to talk about it. "What do you want to know, Dad?" she replied, trying to avoid the question. Her father wasn't satisfied with her answer. He looked at her sternly. "When am I going to get a grandson?" he demanded. Ore felt a lump in her throat. She didn't know what to say. "I'm not God, Dad. I can't control that," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Her father's next words hit her hard. "Don't play smart with me, Ore. I know Adetola doesn't like you, and honestly, I don't blame him." Ore was shocked by how harsh her father was being. "Dad, that's not true," she began, but he cut her off. "Listen to me. You need to get him to sleep with you, or I will have to take matters into my hands." Ore felt tears welling up, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give her father the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "We are sharing a bed, Dad," she lied, hoping he wouldn't push the issues further. Her father seemed to believe her, at least for now. "Good. I'll have my assistant send you some money to buy whatever you need." "No, I don't need anything," Ore said quickly, "but there is something I want to talk to you about." "If it's about Darasimi, save your breath," her father said, his voice cold. "I don't want to hear it." Ore sighed. "How do you know what I wanted to talk about?" "Because I know you. You've always been soft, the one with a heart, but you are also weak. I've made my decision about your sister, and I'm not going to change it." Ore tried to reason with him. "Dad, why can't you try to understand her? She deserves a chance at love, just like anyone else." Her father wasn't moved. "Ope, show her out," he said to his assistant, who stepped forward to escort Ore from the office. Ore stood up, defeated. "One day you will regret this," she said quietly as she left. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Adetola was having a similar conversation with his father. His father had called him over to ask him about his marriage. "How are things with you and Ore?" his father asked. "I know she wasn't your choice, but your mother picked her for a reason. She's a good girl, and you need to make it work." Adetola didn't want to talk about it, so he lied. "Everything is fine, Dad. You will have grandchildren soon." His father seemed satisfied with that answer. "Good. Just remember, family is everything." Adetola nodded, but inside, he knew things were far from fine. He wasn't in love with Ore, and he didn't know how much longer he could keep up the act. His father wanted grandchildren, but there was one big problem. Adetola couldn't have children. He hadn't told anyone, not even Ore. That night, when Adetola came home, Ore was surprised to see him join her for dinner. They hadn't eaten together in days. As they sat down, Ore wondered why he was being so nice all of a sudden. Adetola cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he said. "Our parents want us to have a child, and it's clear that things between us aren't going the way they should." Ore didn't know where this was going, but she waited for him to continue. "I think we should consider other options," Adetola said, "like artificial insemination or surrogacy." Ore felt like she had been slapped. "You're not going to sleep with me? Is that what this is all about?" she asked, her voice shaking. Adetola sighed. "I'm just being honest with you. I don't want to lie to our parents. We need to be realistic." Ore couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had hoped that one day Adetola might change his mind, that they might become a real couple. But now he was telling her that it was never going to happen. "I don't want a surrogate or artificial insemination," Ore said quietly. "I want to have a child naturally." Adetola shook his head. That's not going to happen. So, you need to think about what you want, because we don't have much time before our parents start asking questions. Ore sat in silence, her heart heavy. She didn't know what to do. Adetola got up from the table and walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. As she sat there, Ore realized that all her hopes for her marriage had been shattered. She had married Adetola hoping for love, but now she knew that was never going to happen. She sighed, knowing that a difficult decision lay ahead of her. Darasimi was now married to Toluwani, just as her father, Chief Akinola, had planned. The wedding was quiet, with only close family and friends present. It wasn't a happy day for Darasimi. She found Toluwani unpleasant and knew about his bad behavior with other women. But Darasimi had already made up her mind. She was going to take revenge on her father for forcing her into this marriage. And now that she had seen how cruel Toluwani was, she was more determined than ever. She knew that both her father and Toluwani would regret their actions. On the day of the wedding, Darasimi's sister, Ore, was feeling sick. She tried to smile and act normal, especially with Adetola by her side. But her stomach hurt and she felt dizzy. As soon as the wedding ended, she asked Adetola to take her home. He agreed and they left quietly. As soon as they reached the house, Ore collapsed just as she stepped out of the car. Adetola panicked, trying to wake her up. The driver helped, but when Ore did not respond, they rushed her to the hospital. At the hospital, Adetola waited anxiously. He thought about calling his parents, but he didn't want to worry them yet. He decided to wait until the doctor told him what was wrong with Ore. After what seemed like hours, the doctor called Adetola into his office. The doctor's words shocked him. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, and he started to laugh, even though there was nothing funny about the news. The doctor looked at him in surprise, but Adetola couldn't stop laughing. Ore was pregnant. When she heard the news, she was too shocked to speak. How could this be? How would she explain to Adetola? What would her father do when he found out? She knew how angry he had been with Darasimi. He would be furious when he found out about her situation. The worst part, the baby was Farouk's, and she had no way to contact him. Adetola walked into her hospital room, his face serious. Ore could feel his anger as he stared at her. Finally, he spoke. "Are you pregnant?" he asked. His voice was cold. Ore didn't answer at first. She didn't know what to say. "Are you pregnant?" Adetola repeated louder than this time. Ore nodded. "Yes," she said quietly. "How could this happen?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Who is the father?" "I don't know where he is," Ore replied, her voice soft. Adetola's face turned red with anger. "You don't know?" he shouted. "How could you not know?" Ore didn't want to tell him the whole truth, but she knew she had no choice. "I met someone while we were in Dubai," she said slowly. "He was kind to me. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." Adetola stared at her in disbelief. "You slept with someone in Dubai?" he asked. Ore nodded. She could feel the tears coming out, but she held them back. "You are unbelievable," Adetola said, shaking his head. He turned and stormed out of the room without saying another word. Ore sat alone in her hospital bed, feeling scared and confused. She knew that her life was about to change forever, and she didn't know what to do. She wished she could turn back time and undo everything that had happened in Dubai, but she knew that was not possible. Meanwhile, Adetola went to meet his friend Jaye. He was still angry and didn't know what to do. "Can you believe she's pregnant?" Adetola asked. Jaye raised his eyebrow. "That's a mess," he said. "I don't know what to do," Adetola admitted. Jaye thought for a moment. "You could pretend the baby is yours," he suggested. Adetola frowned. "She will never agree to that," he said. "You have to convince her," Jaye said. "It's better than telling your parents the truth. And who knows, maybe the father will never show up." Adetola wasn't sure, but he knew that Jaye was right. If Ore didn't know how to find the father, maybe no one would ever know the truth. A few days passed, and Adetola still hadn't come home. Ore had called her friend Temi to pick her up from the hospital. She told Temi everything that had happened. Temi was shocked. "Why didn't you use protection?" Temi asked. I wasn't thinking, Ore replied sadly. It just happened so fast. This is a mess, Temi said. What are you going to do now? Ore shook her head. I don't know, she said. Adetola left, and I haven't heard from him since. Are you going to tell Farouk? Temi asked. I don't even know how to find him, Ore said. And what if he doesn't want anything to do with the baby? What if Adetola wants you to have an abortion? Temi asked quietly. Ore's eyes widened. I won't do that, she said firmly. This is my baby, and no one is going to hurt it. 3 days after she came home from the hospital, Ore was still feeling lost and alone. She didn't know what to do next. It had been many weeks since Ore last stepped her foot inside the church. She used to go regularly, always making sure to attend services and join in prayers. But now, things had changed. Her life had become complicated, and she found it hard to focus on anything, especially going to church. Her pastor noticed her absence and was concerned. He had tried calling her, but she didn't answer. He even sent her messages, but there was no reply. One evening, after much thought, the pastor decided to visit Ore at home. He told his wife about his plan, and she agreed to go with him. They both felt it was important to check on her, to see if she was okay. When the pastor and his wife arrived at Ore's house, they knocked on the door. Ore was inside resting when she heard the knock. She wasn't expecting anyone, and she was surprised. Slowly, she got up and went to open the door. To her shock, it was her pastor and his wife standing there. Pastor, what a surprise, Ore said, trying to smile. Please come in. The pastor and his wife smiled back and stepped into the house. Ore led them to the living room and offered them seats. She sat across from them, feeling a bit nervous. She wondered why they had come. What did they come to talk about? The pastor and his wife exchanged looks before the pastor spoke. Ore, he began, we have not seen you in church for some time, and I have called you many times, but you didn't pick up. We were worried. We were so worried about you, so we came to check if you are okay. Ore lowered her head, feeling a bit ashamed. She had been avoiding the pastor's call on purpose because she didn't know how to explain her situation. But now, sitting in front of him, she realized she couldn't avoid it any longer. I'm sorry, Pastor, she said softly. A lot has been going on in my life, and I didn't know how to talk about it. The pastor's wife leaned forward, giving Ore a kind look. It's okay, Ore. We are here for you. Do you want to tell us what's happening? Ore looked at them, feeling their concern. She knew they weren't there to judge her, but she still hesitated. Her problems were too big and messy, and she wasn't sure where to start. After a moment of silence, she decided to open up. It's so complicated, Ore began slowly. You see, I've been facing some challenges, and they've kept me from church. The pastor nodded, showing that he understood. We all face challenges, Ore, but remember, you don't have to go through them alone. God is always there to help you, and so we are. Ore felt a little better hearing those words, but she knew she hadn't told them everything yet. Taking a deep breath, she continued, Pastor, there's something else. I'm pregnant. The pastor's wife's eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly recovered, reaching out to take Ore's hand. Oh, Ore, that's wonderful news, but why would this stop you from coming to church? Ore bit her lip, feeling the weight of the truth she was about to reveal. It's because the baby isn't my husband's. The room fell into silence after Ore's confession. The pastor and his wife exchanged shocked glances, but they didn't say anything right away. They wanted to give Ore the space to explain. Ore's voice shook as she spoke again. It happened during our honeymoon. I met someone else. I made a mistake, and now I'm pregnant. The pastor finally spoke, his voice gentle but firm. I see. That is indeed a difficult situation, Ore. But remember, no matter what has happened, God's love and forgiveness are always available. You are not alone in this. Ore felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had been carrying this secret for so long, and now that it was out, she felt both scared and relieved. I've been so worried, she admitted. I don't know how to face the future, what people will think, or how I'm going to handle everything. The pastor's wife squeezed her hand. You don't have to do this alone, Ore. We are here for you. And more importantly, God is with you. He will guide you through this. The pastor's voice grew more serious as he added, Ore, there is something else I need to tell you. I had a revelation about you, and I believe it's important for you to hear. Ore looked at him, her heart racing. She wasn't sure what the pastor was about to say, but something inside her told her it was serious. In the revelation, the pastor began, I saw that your entire family, as well as your husband's family, were in chains. They were being tormented day and night. The only ones not in chains were you and your mother-in-law. Adetola's mother, Ore asked, surprised. The pastor nodded. Yes, in the vision, your mother-in-law was calling for you to help her free the family, but you were too weak to do anything. In the end, the whole family perished, including you. Ore felt a shiver run through her body. What does this mean, Pastor? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. The pastor looked at her with deep concern. It means that your family is in danger, Ore, and you are the one who can save them. But right now, you are too weak, spiritually weak. You need to return to God and strengthen your faith. Only then can you help your family. Ore swallowed hard. The idea that she had a role to play in saving her family was so overwhelming. She had never thought of herself as someone important, let alone someone who could make a difference in a situation this serious. So what do I do, Pastor? She asked, her voice trembling. You need to pray, Ore. The pastor replied, pray with all your heart, and you need to commit yourself fully to God. You can't live half in the word and half in faith. You have to make a choice. Ore nodded, understanding the gravity of what the pastor was saying. She knew that her life had become a mess because she hadn't been living fully for God. And now, it seemed that her family's future depended on her making things right. Before leaving, the pastor and his wife prayed for Ore. They asked God to forgive her and give her strength, wisdom and peace as she faced the difficult challenges ahead. Ore felt comforted by their prayer and thanked them for coming. She knew she had a long road ahead, but she felt a little more prepared to face it with their support. After the pastor and his wife left, Ore sat alone in her living room, thinking about everything they had said. The pastor's words about the vision weighed heavily on her mind. She couldn't stop thinking about the chains, the torments, and her mother-in-law calling for help. Was her family really in danger? And was she the one who had to save them? Ore knew one thing for sure. She needed to pray. She hadn't been praying much lately, and she realized now that this was part of the problem. If she wanted to be strong enough to face the challenges ahead, she needed to turn back to God. So that night, Ore knelt by her bed and prayed. She poured out her heart to God, asking for forgiveness, for strength and for guidance. She prayed for her family, for her marriage, and for her unborn child. She didn't know what the future held, but she trusted that God would lead her in the right direction. In the days that followed, Ore made a conscious effort to spend more time in prayer and reading the Bible. She found comfort in the scriptures and the knowledge that God was with her, even in the midst of her troubles. Meanwhile, Ore hadn't heard from her husband Adetola since the day he left her at the hospital. He hadn't called or texted, and he hadn't come home. Ore wasn't sure where he was or what he was doing, but she tried not to let it bother her too much. She knew she had to focus on her spiritual journey and trust that everything else would fall into place in time. But one evening, after many weeks of silence, Adetola finally returned home. Ore was in the kitchen when she heard the front door open. She walked into the living room to find Adetola standing there looking serious. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm. Ore crossed her arms, unsure of what to expect. "About what?" she asked. "The pregnancy." Adetola replied, "I take full responsibility for my actions. I know that if I hadn't left you alone in Dubai, that wouldn't have happened. But it has happened, and now we need to figure out what to do next." Ore listened to him carefully, waiting for him to continue. "If this pregnancy gets out," Adetola went on, "our parents are going to be furious. There will be a lot of trouble on both sides. So I've been thinking, maybe we can use this pregnancy to our own advantage. What do you mean? Ore asked, her eyebrow furrowed in confusion. With this pregnancy, we don't need to go through artificial insemination or surrogacy. Ore was so dumbfounded that day that she couldn't say anything. One day at a lounge, Dara was approached by a serious-looking man. He questioned why she was there, asking about her husband, Tolu. Dara, unbothered, explained that her marriage to Tolu was just for appearances. While he enjoyed his life, she was there to do the same. The man, frustrated, insisted she leave, but Dara stood firm, reminding him he had no authority over her. When he threatened to call her father, she dared him, hinting at his secrets with her sister. Realizing she had seen something she shouldn't, the man demanded to know what Dara wanted. She simply stated her wish to be left alone, and he left, feeling satisfied. Dara thought her plan was progressing well and soon left. A few days later, Ore, overwhelmed with confusion, visited her friend Temi. They discussed the potential consequences of her actions, especially if her father learned of her affair during her honeymoon. Temi advised her to consider the risks, but Ore remained unsure, sensing something was off. Returning home, Ore was surprised by an unexpected visit from her mother-in-law, who quickly guessed she was pregnant. Instead of joy, her mother-in-law seemed concerned, advising Ore to take care of herself. She hinted at a family battle and urged Ore to pray. As soon as her mother-in-law left, Ore was filled with unease. She thought about the warning, then went to her room and prayed for guidance and safety. Meanwhile, her mother-in-law, driving home with a heavy heart, feared for her family's future, praying that the unborn child wouldn't continue their struggles. Later, Ore called Adetola to share the visit. He saw this as a sign she was on board with his plan, and they agreed to keep her pregnancy a secret. Ore reflected on how quickly her life had changed, feeling like she was caught in a complex story. The next day, Ore received an email inviting her to an important meeting with the CEO. Ore walked into the office the following morning, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. She was greeted warmly by Titilope, who smiled at her and said, "I'm sorry, but the CEO had to leave unexpectedly." Ore felt disappointed. She had looked forward to meeting him, but she reminded herself there would be other chances. She sat in the meeting room, waiting, but her heart was heavy. Farouk was in his car, ready to go home. He took a deep breath and sighed. His body felt weak because of a rare illness that affected his nerves. Sometimes they trembled, making him feel unwell. But when he was not having an episode, he felt okay. His doctors had warned him that he might have a big health problem in the future. He thought about Oreoluwa. He missed her very much. If I could see her again, I would feel happy, he thought. He almost searched for her on social media, but stopped himself. He wondered how she was and if she thought about him too. Meanwhile, Darasimi was at home when her phone rang. It was Chief Ayegba. "I want to talk to you about the secret," he said. Darasimi wanted to meet him in person. "Let's meet at your guest house," she suggested, but he refused. He wanted her to come to his office the next day. The following day, when Darasimi arrived at Chief Ayegba's office, he offered her some money. "This is for keeping my secret," he said. "No, thank you," she replied firmly. "What do you want then, Dara?" he asked. Dara stood up and walked closer to him. "I want you," she said confidently. The chief was shocked. "You want me? You can't be serious. You are like a daughter to me." "Yes, I'm like a daughter to you, but I am not your daughter," she said. "Why are you saying this? Your father and I are good friends. Nothing can happen between us," he replied, trying to keep his cool. "Don't pretend. I see how you look at me," Darasimi challenged. The chief felt embarrassed. "Yes, I think you are beautiful, but that is all. I think you should leave now," he said, feeling uncomfortable. "Fine, I'll go, but don't blame me if I tell your wife about your affair with her sister," she said boldly. The chief's face turned red with anger. He grabbed her by the throat. "You think you can threaten me? I won't let you ruin my life because you are my friend's daughter. Get out of here," he shouted. Darasimi quickly grabbed her bag and rushed out of the office. She went to the restroom and took a moment to breathe. She felt scared, but she was not defeated. I will find another way, she promised herself. Meanwhile, Adetola was excited to tell his father about Ore's pregnancy. When he told him, his father was very happy. This is wonderful news. Let's celebrate tonight, he said, calling his friend Chief Akinola. Adetola's mother stood quietly beside her husband as he spoke on the phone. When he hung up, she looked at him with concern. Please, don't do this, she pleaded. This is too important. We must go ahead with our plans, he replied firmly. But it's your grandchild, she said, her voice filled with disbelief. There is so much at stake. You know that, he said. Things can change if you accept God. Don't mention that name again, he shouted. You are my wife, and you will stay with me, he insisted, walking away. Later, Chief Akinola called Ore. I heard the good news. I'm proud of you. I didn't know you could get Adetola to sleep with you, he said, sounding pleased. Ore felt uneasy. What do you mean, she thought. Take care of this baby, he continued. You must guard it with your life. What do you mean guard it with my life? This is my child, Ore replied, feeling upset. This child belongs to both families. Make sure you take care of him, her father said. Him? What if it's a girl? Ore questioned. It's better be a boy, Chief Akinola declared seriously. Ore felt troubled by her father's words. She also noticed her mother-in-law acting strangely after learning about her pregnancy. Feeling the weight of it all, Ore decided to pray. She set times to pray and even woke up at night to talk to God. Sometimes, the pastor's wife would call her to pray together, giving Ore support during this confusing time. Meanwhile, Darasimi decided to visit Adetola at his office. When she arrived, he was surprised but happy to see her. You left me for your boyfriend, he said playfully. Yes, but he's no longer in my life. How about we get together? Darasimi suggested boldly. Get together? I'm married to Ore, your sister. Adetola replied, shaking his head. So what? They don't have to know. I know you like me, she said, teasing him. Adetola felt tempted but said, Dara, my life is complicated right now. I can't add more problems. Are you sure? I can give you a massage to help you relax, she said with a smile. No, thank you. This is my office. I need to focus on work, he replied firmly. Dara smiled and said, we could lock the door. You know you want this. Just then, Tiwa walked in. What is happening here? She said, surprised. Adetola jumped, trying to act normal. Nothing, just talking business, he said quickly. Dara smiled, picked up her bag and left. Why was she so close to you? Tiwa demanded. Forget about her. She's just looking for trouble, Adetola said. Are you sure? I hope you're not thinking of cheating on me with her, Tiwa said, crossing her arms. No, of course not. Come, sit down. Let's talk, Adetola said, wanting to change the topic. Meanwhile, Ore spent her time thinking about the future. She wanted to keep her baby safe. With every prayer, she felt more hopeful. As days went by, Ore continued to strengthen her faith and spirit. But deep down, she felt the tension between her family's expectation and her desire to be a good mother. She wished for peace and happiness in her family, but the worries never seemed to go away. Darasimi, on the other hand, was determined. She wanted to find a way to have what she desired, even if it meant taking risk. Adetola, Darasimi, Ore, we are all at different crossroads in their lives, each facing challenges and decisions that will shape their futures. Darasimi had a plan. After her first try to get Chief Ayegba's attention failed, she moved on to plan B. She thought about how many rich older men like to visit a private dance club. She learned that Chief Ayegba often went there. Darasimi wanted to get into that club, so she paid to join. The manager of the club gave her a short training. She learned how to dance and what to do with the men who came there. Darasimi waited at the club every day, hoping to see Chief Ayegba. It took 2 weeks, but finally the chief came. The manager sent Darasimi to a special room just for him. In this club, the dancers wore masks and did more than just dance. They offered special services to the clients. Darasimi was young and had a curvy body, which made her very attractive. When she danced for the chief, he could not take his eyes off her. After her dance, they did things together that she had not planned. A few days later, the manager told her that the chief wanted to see her again. Darasimi was excited. She danced for him again, teasing him with her moves. This time, after they were done, Darasimi decided to show him who she really was. "My God, what have you done, Darasimi? Your father will kill me," the chief said in surprise. "Who is going to tell him?" Darasimi answered calmly. "What do you want? Are you trying to play games with me?" he asked, his voice rising. "No, chief, I like you. I really do," she said with a smile. "That's nonsense. What are you really up to?" he asked, looking confused. Darasimi took a deep breath. "Okay, fine. My father married me to a man named Tolu without asking me. Tolu is a terrible person. He hurts me every day. You are the only one person who can talk to my father about this. Please tell him that Tolu has been abusing me." "Is this not a trick to get back at your boyfriend?" the chief asked suspiciously. "No, chief. My boyfriend left me because of my father gave him money to go away. That is over for now. Listen, your father will not listen to me. You need to find another way to solve your problems," the chief said, looking serious. He quickly packed his things and left the room. After he left, Darasimi smiled. She knew he would come back. Her plan was bigger than just getting the chief to talk to her father. She had a secret reason for sleeping with him. "Don't worry, you will soon find out who I really am," she thought to herself. Meanwhile, Ore was now in her second trimester of pregnancy. The first part of her pregnancy was calm, but now she was feeling pain in her waist. Adetola took her to the hospital. The doctor looked at Ore and said she needed to rest. He told them that some women felt pain during the second trimester, but it would go away soon. As Ore and Adetola walked out of the doctor's office, Ore saw a man walking around the corner. She stopped. He looked just like Farouk, but she was not sure. "Are you okay, Ore? You look scared," Adetola asked. "No, I'm fine. I just felt a little dizzy," Ore replied, trying to act normal. "Should we go back to the doctor?" Adetola asked again, concerned. "No, I'm fine now. Let's go home," Ore said, taking a deep breath. Her heart was beating fast as they left the hospital. If she were alone, she would have followed the man to see if it was really Farouk. But Adetola was with her, so she could not. Ore quickly took out her phone and sent a message to her friend Temi. She told Temi what had happened. Temi replied, telling her to stay calm and that maybe it was just her imagination. At the same time, Farouk was also at the hospital. He was there for a checkup with his mother. It was his first time visiting this hospital because his doctor had moved there. The doctor wanted to see how Farouk was doing with the new medicine. Even though the medicines could not cure him, it was supposed to help him live longer. During his checkup, Farouk complained, "Doctor, the medicine makes me so tired. I can't do anything because I feel sleepy all the time." The doctor examined him and decided Farouk should take only half a tablet instead of a full one. Farouk felt happy about this. He thanked the doctor and left the office. On their way home, Farouk's mother asked him about a girl he met in Dubai. "Did you try to reach out to her?" she asked. "No, why should I? I told you it doesn't matter," Farouk replied. "But what if she's pregnant?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "Come on, Mom, we only met once," he said, shaking his head. "Once is enough to make a baby," she pointed out. Farouk thought for a moment. "Well, I don't think she would be silly enough to sleep with a guy and not be careful," he said. "Okay, but if you have a child out there, I want to know in case something happens. You need to trust God for your healing," she added. Farouk became lost in thought. He remembered Ore and how naive she had seemed when they met. He had promised himself not to take advantage of her. He recalled the night and realized it was her first time. Could she be expecting a baby? He pushed the thought away. If she was pregnant, she would have looked for him. He didn't think about how hard it was for her to find him since he was not on social media. Darasimi did not wait any long before the chief called her to meet him at one of his guest houses. She had a new plan for the meeting, but when she arrived, the security guards stopped her. They made her leave her phone behind. Without her phone, she could not carry out her plan. She felt frustrated but promised herself she would think of something else. Meanwhile, Darasimi had been sending pictures of herself to Adetola. She knew that if he didn't block her after the first picture, she could keep him. She wanted to make both the chief and his son regret crossing her father. She thought about how much fun it would be to humiliate her father in front of his friends. She was ready to pay any price for the revenge. Once she was done with her father, she would find Toby, the man who had betrayed her, and teach him a lesson too. Darasimi was so focused on her revenge that she did not see the danger she was putting herself in. It was like something was controlling her, making her act without thinking. She thought she was being clever, but she had no idea of the troubles that were coming her way. She had opened a door that could lead to a lot of problems. The evening fell as Darasimi waited in the guest house, a plan swelling in her mind. Little did she know her choices were leading her down a dangerous path that could change her life forever. Ore spent the weekend feeling troubled as she and her best friend Temi struggled to find a way out of the complicated situation they were in. By Monday morning, they still had no solution, and Ore's mind remained unsettled. She discovered that her meeting, originally set for Tuesday, had been moved to Monday, adding to her anxiety. At the office, Ore was greeted by her colleague Titi Lope, who informed her that the CEO was in and she would be introduced to him before their meeting. Titi Lope led her to the CEO's office, where a man stood with his back to them. As they turned around, Ore realized it was Farouk. Overwhelmed by the shock, she fainted. Farouk managed to catch her and noticed she was pregnant. He wondered if the child could be his, though he feared it might be her husband's. As Ore regained consciousness, memories of their time together in Dubai flooded back. She wanted to leave, but Farouk demanded answers about their time together. He needed to know if the baby was his, but Ore denied it, insisting the child belonged to her husband. Farouk remained unconvinced, vowing to pursue a paternity test after the baby was born. Feeling trapped, Ore rushed out, desperate to escape the confrontation. She directed the driver to Adetola's office, hoping to find a way forward. Ignoring the secretary, Ore entered his office, only to find Adetola with another woman, Tiwa, in a compromising position. Shocking! She demanded to speak with him urgently. Reluctantly, Adetola asked Tiwa to leave, and after a tense exchange, Tiwa stormed out. Ore felt a brief sense of victory, but knew the real challenge lay ahead. Along with Adetola, she revealed that the father of her baby had found her and was also her boss. Adetola, taken aback, tried to process the news, and the reality of their situation began to sink in. He admitted his lack of attraction to her, leaving Ore hurt and frustrated. She explained that Farouk suspected the baby might be his and wanted a DNA test. Both Ore and Adetola sat in silence, burdened by the tangled web they had woven. Their arranged marriage, once a simple solution, had now spiraled into a maze of secrets and deceit. Each felt the weight of the choices they had made with no easy way out. After Farouk contacted his lawyer and mother, they both agreed that a DNA test was the best way to find out if Ore's baby was really his. Farouk felt very sure that the baby belonged to him, so he didn't want to back down. He was determined to get the truth. With the address he found on the papers Ore had submitted at work, Farouk decided to visit her and confront her in her house. One day, when Farouk arrived at Ore's home, she was shocked to see him standing at the door. She didn't know what to say or how to explain everything. Her heart was beating fast because she knew Farouk would not easily believe her lies anymore. Just as Farouk began to ask her questions, Adetola, her husband, came in. Adetola saw Farouk and immediately stepped in to defend Ore. He told Farouk to stay away from his wife and his family. He said that the baby Ore was carrying belonged to him, and Farouk had no right to interfere. But Farouk wasn't convinced at all. He told Adetola that the only way he would believe them is if they agreed to take a DNA test after the baby was born. Ore was even more confused and scared now. She didn't know what to do anymore. The night she called her best friend, Temi, and told her about everything that was happening. Temi advised Ore not to deny Farouk the right to know if the child was his. She reminded Ore that keeping the truth hidden would only make things worse in the future. But even after talking to Temi, Ore felt more lost than ever. While Ore was struggling with her own problems, something terrible happened. Dara, who was known for her reckless ways, had gotten pregnant. In her attempt to secretly get rid of the baby, Dara lost her life. The news of Dara's death broke Ore's heart. She had never imagined something like this could happen. Though they weren't very close, the thought of Dara dying that way made her feel very sad. Strangely, Adetola's father seemed relieved by Dara's death. He had always seen her as a threat to his plans. A few days after Dara's passing, Ore decided she couldn't continue lying about the paternity of her child. She was tired of pretending, and the guilt was eating her up. She told Adetola that she planned to tell Farouk the truth. Adetola tried to stop her by offering her money to keep quiet, but Ore refused. She wasn't interested in money anymore. She just wanted to do what was right. That evening, Farouk went to a step further in his quest to find out the truth. He made a public broadcast, accusing Ore of trying to keep him away from his child. The news spread quickly, and Ore's father, Chief Akinola, heard about it. He was furious and immediately summoned Ore and Adetola to come and explain what was going on. When Ore arrived at her parents' house, she broke down and told them everything. She confessed to her parents that the baby she was carrying belonged to Farouk, not Adetola. Her father was so shocked and disappointed by the truth that he suffered a heart attack right in front of her. They rushed him to the hospital, and Ore felt a heavy weight on her shoulders. She knew things had reached a point of no return. The secret was out, and she couldn't take it back. As Ore and Adetola left the hospital, Adetola told her that their marriage was over. He knew that the truth about the baby meant that their arrangement could no longer continue. Ore also realized that she had no place left in Adetola's home. She decided to move in with Semi until she could figure out her next steps. Ore was furious at Farouk for going on air and dragging her name into the public. She decided to confront him at the office. On the day she went to see him, Farouk was happy to see her, but Ore was not in a good mood. She angrily asked him why he had to involve the media in their private issue. Farouk calmly explained that he had no choice because he was desperate to find out the truth. He told her that he would do anything to make sure the child didn't belong to him. But just as he was speaking, Farouk said something that made Ore stop in her tracks. Farouk mentioned that he didn't have much time left, which confused Ore. She asked him what he meant by that. But before Farouk could explain, he suddenly collapsed. Ore screamed for help, and Farouk's personal assistant rushed in and quickly took him to the clinic. After some time, Farouk was stabilized, and Ore was allowed to see him. Feeling sorry for him, Ore finally admitted that the baby was his. Farouk was overwhelmed with relief and happiness. His mother, who had been by his side throughout his illness, was also filled with joy at the news. In the days that followed, Farouk was discharged from the clinic and began making plans for the future. Even though Ore refused to move in with him, he rented a place for her and made sure she had everything she needed during the pregnancy. Farouk became actively involved in the pregnancy, attending doctor's appointments with Ore and helping her in every way he could. Temi, as always, stayed by Ore's side and supported her through it all. As time passed, more tragedies unfolded. Ore's father and mother both died mysteriously, and Adetola's father also passed away under strange circumstances. It seemed as though dark forces were at play, taking away the people in Ore's life one by one. When Tiwa found out that there was nothing left for her to inherit from Adetola's family, she left him without a second thought. Adetola and his mother, realizing they had lost everything, decided to relocate to Canada and start a new life there. As for Ore, she gave birth to a healthy baby with Farouk by her side. He was thrilled to be a father, and together they began building a new future for their child. Although Ore's life had taken many unexpected turns, she was ready to embrace the next chapter, knowing that she had the support of Farouk and Temi to help her along the way. And with that, my dear friends, our story comes to a close. But remember, the magic of storytelling lives on. waiting to whisk us away on new adventures where the wonders of imagination know no bounds. Goodbye for now, and may your dreams be filled with joy, wonder, and endless possibility. Thank you so much for watching. Please kindly comment, like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting stories.